For our blog, we decided to do The Secret Life of the American Teenager. It's a television series about a 15-year-old girl who gets pregnant and all of the drama surrounding it in high school. In the show, one of the supporting roles is Tom. Tom is played by Luke Zimmerman, who is an actor who has Down syndrome. Throughout the show, Tom has a really big support system and a few love interests. His love interests are Tammy, Rachel, and Betty. Tammy and Rachel are girlfriends, and Betty is a friend of his. And Grace, Jack, and Kathleen are his support system. Grace is his big sister, and Kathleen is his adoptive mother. In the show, his parents died and they adopted him. Jack is his best friend and also Grace's boyfriend for part of the show. He lives with Jack together in the guest house of the Bowmans.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about Down syndrome specifically before we get into the show. Down syndrome is actually an extra 21st chromosome. It's called trisomy 21, scientific term. Some statistics on Down syndrome. There's 6,000 babies roughly a year born with this condition. It comes out to 1 in every 700 babies. And older women, specifically over the age of 40, are more likely to give birth to kids with Down syndrome.
People with Down syndrome usually tend to have decreased muscle tone, flattened facial features, and are usually shorter. They also have shorter attention span, impulsive behavior, delayed language, and speech problems. It also has high comorbidity with other mental disorders like depression or anxiety.
Some things to know when it comes to language. So you always want to use person-first language when referring to someone who has Down syndrome. So you want to say a person with Down syndrome, not a child, like Down syndrome child. Also, you want to avoid saying Downs, a child with Downs, or he has Downs. You always want to say Down syndrome. It's also a condition and a syndrome, not a disease. So someone with Down syndrome does not suffer from it. They're not afflicted by it. It's, they have it.
So guys, for The Secret Life of the American Teenager, how do you feel that the audience feels about having an actor who actually has a disability portray someone with a disability rather than hiring someone else to play the actor?
I think the viewers love it. I think the viewers like having someone who is genuine to that role. But I feel like the directors and the producers, they want to get someone who they know is going to get the job done. And so there's a stigma in that area where, oh, they have Down syndrome, they have a disease, they're not going to be able to do the job. But obviously in this case, he did it well, and he did it exactly how it should be done because he does have the disease.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I feel like us as the viewers, everyone else, they like the fact, and especially when they find that out. Like they might not even know it beforehand, but when they find that out, I think it gets them more interested.
Yeah.
And sorry.
And they also are a person first, so everyone has their own interests and like talent. So his talent was obviously acting, so he went through with that. Whereas like someone else, their talent might be swimming or skateboarding or whatever. So the fact that he has Down syndrome doesn't mean he can't do what he's good at.
Mm-hmm. I actually was going to say, I read on a website called Babbel.com that he was one of the first actors with Down syndrome to appear on television, like from the early 90s. He was the first recurring person to ever start appearing on a television show. So I thought, like, the fact that he actually has a disability and that he was one of the first people to start reoccurring, it must have been, like, really great for the whole disability community.
I'm pretty sure he's on Glee. I don't know, I think I read that somewhere that he's on Glee too. So he began somewhere and he's transitioned.
This does like raise the question of, do you think that the producers used him because obviously Down syndrome is, many people with Down syndrome have similar facial and like physical characteristics. So do you think, just kind of thinking about it in that aspect, do you think that the producers were like thinking, oh, okay, we need someone with Down syndrome so people really understand what Down syndrome is? Or is it because it was just more convenient for them to use someone with Down syndrome because, oh, he has the Down syndrome and he looks like someone else?
I think that the producers had the choice, or the writers per se, to even throw in a character with a disability. So I feel like the fact that they made the choice to have that character and keep the character shows that they were actually interested in showing people like that there's no difference with someone with a disability and how they live the same lives that we do. That might have played a role. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I know also raised the question like visible versus invisible. Like you can see it, whereas like if they had put someone on the show who had autism, like would it be different because you actually it's not
Right.
you can't see by the way they look.
Mm-hmm.
I think we talked about this earlier though. Like if you do cast someone who doesn't have Down syndrome, like you're gonna have to get either some makeup artist or some visual effect person to make it appear as if they do.
Correct.
So that comes into more. You have to hire more people,
More money,
more process, more
right.
money spent. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it could just be convenient to the
To the producers themselves or the writers.
Yeah, I would love to know like what the whole community thought about how he was gonna play this and having the show have someone with a disability, and if people were nervous when they first read the script, if he was even nervous when he first read the script, like, okay, this is a big role, like,
Right.
I'm gonna do this, and
Right.
if he was nervous about any backlash or anything.
Yeah, it would be interesting to also see like kind of like behind the scene footage, kind of like seeing like was it hard for him, you know?
Him like with the other actors.
Yeah.
Right,
too,
correct.
like-
Interacting
Working
with
with
them.
other actors, or even the actors interacting with them. Like, were they afraid? Were they didn't know how to act? You know, we talk
Yeah.
about that in class a lot. We talk about, oh, like people with disabilities aren't contagious. You know, so I wonder how like they acted in that situation when they
Yeah.
saw someone. I mean, I figure they were pretty welcoming, and you know,
Yeah, and like if
It
if
was
they
something.
weren't, like if it changed their perspective, like, you know, like they were shown like firsthand someone with a disability wasn't that different from them and they could do just what they were doing, which was acting.
Right.
Mhm.
And, you know, maybe like their perception was changed.
yeah,
You touched on that earlier, how it's a condition, not a disease, and like you're not gonna contract Down
Correct.
syndrome just because you
Yeah.
shake their hand.
Right.
Like like you said, it'll be interesting to see how they interacted with
Yeah.
yeah.
Luke.
And how he felt too, just because it's probably something new to him. I know you touched on it too. You mentioned how you know he wanted to be an actor and like this is what he liked, and different people have you know want to be different things. So just kind of pursuing his dream and you know how he felt about the whole experience. You know.
Yeah, I was also just thinking about, so I read he auditioned for the show in 2007, and that's only 11 years ago.
Mhm.
But that feels so long ago, and I'm sure people's perceptions were totally changed back then because nowadays we're so much more accepting, even though it's only a 10-year difference.
Yeah.
Correct. So like
Yeah.
back, how has the audience changed in those years? You know, or how did they you know initially you know
React.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it shows too on the show, like having someone come on a show like that it's not all about their disability, like it's about like other aspects of their life that don't really revolve around having Down syndrome. It's about like having like meeting someone you love, like having sex, going through school, like making friends, which is like really interesting.
And I like that about the show. You know, they didn't just focus on his disability. Like, he has Down syndrome. This is what he's going through. They could have easily just been like, this is his daily life, his daily living. But they were like, he's a regular person just like everybody else, and he falls in love. He has sex. You know, all of these things that a normal actor would do, he's doing as well, which I think is a really good
It's almost
portrayal.
never referred to in the show, the fact that he has a disability. It's almost unspoken because it's just known that he does. They
Yeah.
speak about it and like almost never bring it up again because he's just living his life.
Yeah.
And so is everyone else in the show. It's just a show about everyone living their lives, the drama that unfolds
Right.
between all of the love triangles and
The pregnancy.
babies and jobs and whatnot.
Which is good because, you know, a lot of shows when they do have people with disability, if it's, you know, visible or invisible disabilities, usually they try to like portray it and try to maybe bring awareness to it, but they tend to overdo it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like everything is revolved around
Around that person.
So they're not like, it's not like they're a person anymore. It's like it's a show about Down syndrome, not a
Right.
show about the
Mhm.
person.
And they're
who has
living
Down
up to
syndrome.
like their label or, you
Yeah.
know, and because I know I've watched, you know, several shows with like someone has schizophrenia and how like it affects their partner, it affects their relationship. Oh, because she has schizophrenia or because he, you know, it's based on that disability. And like you said, I like how the show, it's not about that. He has disability, we all know it, okay, great, but this is what the show is about, and it kind of just puts that behind.
Exactly.
Okay, so in one of the episodes of Secret Life of the American Teenager, Tom is actually hired to a human resources position. So why do you guys think that somebody who has a disability might make a good candidate for a human resources job? And do you think that him having that disability played a role in getting hired?
I believe that people with a disability like do make good candidates for human resources job, whether it's like a invisible or a visible disability. Specifically just because they're like more well versed on like stuff in like the work environment, and they understand what it is to like be discriminated, but they also have like an idea of like how to go about things differently. Like they see people differently, like they know what they're like, I don't know, they have a different outlook on life than I feel like a normal person that could be more judgmental. So they definitely see it differently. But I believe that like it played a huge role because in one of the episodes, one of the characters, I don't remember exactly what she was, but I believe she like called out his boss about why he was hired, and he said that she said you only hired him just because you were getting sued, and that it was going to like take a liability off you and was going to prevent you from being sued further. So he almost hired him just because he thought it looked better, but Tom does a very good job on top of that, and like when he like was asked, he was like, well, like yeah, but like segued and was like, but he's like very good at what he does. Like he like had a long pause, so he was like agreeing with her, but also saying like he's still good at his job, which kind of plays like it like teeters on the fence of like, okay, well like is that like why you hired him, or like is he like genuinely good? Like were you like, or you kind of like took care of both things to not get sued further?
I mean, that kind of like brings up the question, like even if they were trying to fulfill a quota, in the end they did hire him. Now they know that maybe a person with Down syndrome is a good candidate for a human resources job. So like that kind of brings awareness to like other companies that had not considered that before.
I think that almost goes back to the discussion we had in class about fawn, about are you doing it for the right reasons, and even if you don't start out with it as the right reasons, once you have that experience, that exposure, does it kind of change your perspective and lead you to doing it for the right reasons eventually? And I think you also brought up a really good point about the perspective that somebody with a disability might bring to the workforce, because they have experienced things that other people have not experienced. So I think that them bringing that perspective in can really like change the attitude of your workforce.
I believe that like the whole thong thing that you mentioned, like I honestly believe that his boss like he hired him for the wrong reasons originally, and he was like, well, he's really good at his job now, so like it changed his perspective. And like part of it, like he like first like he was hired for the wrong reason. Like he basically was like, I only hired you, like he didn't like say it, but like he was like inferring it in that like scene that like he was hired because of that. And then but he's very good at his job, which he is. Like when Tammy came in, because Tammy works for him, and she's another one of the characters, and she has, I believe, like a disability as well, and she's very into sex as well, like 'cause Tom's very into sex, like they're very like fascinated with the whole concept. And Tammy like popped in, and he was like, he was like, Tammy, like you need to stop like sexually harassing people with the way you talk. And she goes, what do you mean? And Tom was like, the way you talk to people, like you don't talk like that, that's illegal. And she's like, but it's like human nature, like everyone likes sex, like what are you talking about? He goes, yes, but like the way you're talking to people isn't acceptable, like that is very illegal in the workplace. Like he's like, you need to simmer down. And then like she was like saying stuff back, and it was like piquing his interest because it was still like about the topic of sex, and like he was very intrigued, but he was like, nope, it's illegal, like stop, like watch what you say to people, like it can like come back and like bite you, like it's just like doesn't look good. And he like is well versed on his job. He does know what he's doing. He like knows how to correct people and like address it. So I think that like makes a huge, like it shows that like it doesn't even like come across as anything like so Tom has like Down syndrome, and nobody questions it. Like it's like, okay, like if you know what you're doing, no one's gonna ever say anything to you.
I think there's a few different places that have opened recently that kind of highlight that. So I used to go to school in Wilmington, North Carolina, where they have actually the first coffee shop that employs strictly people with disabilities, and they can be visible or invisible disabilities. And then there's a shop that just opened in downtown State College called Good Day Cafe that only employs people with disabilities. So like, how do you guys feel about that?
I think it's a great thing.
Awesome.
I would like, I'm like, actually I really want to go to the coffee shop. I was like talking about with my friend. I like, it really like piques my interest. I like, I just like love that it gives them an opportunity that I feel like is well needed. Like I feel like they don't get these up. Like people are very judgmental, and especially now the way like the world's changing, it's opening so many more opportunities to everybody with all different types of differences. So I think that that's huge.
So, just kind of like a question, like, why do you guys think that? I mean, like, it's 2018. Why do you think that these kinds of shops are just now opening? Like, why didn't they exist before?
It might just be like human nature that like, people are just still are like having trouble like relating to people that have disabilities, and like it's harder maybe for people to see them as like a normal person, instead of just like the usual like race and other differences.
Yeah, I feel like there's just such stigma around like any kind of disability, like visible or invisible, and people are just not educated about it also.
Right.
So I think that's why it's just been taking a lot for it to like happen.
I definitely agree with like the stigma and the lack of education, and people are definitely becoming like more well versed with things just because I think the way the world's been changing, like there's always something new being brought up, and like the news or the media that's like bringing more attention to it, and like whether it's in like a good light or a bad light, it still makes people more interested to like learn about it and get more well versed.
Definitely.
So since we were just talking about Tom and his interest in sex that we mentioned previously with his workplace, I wanted to talk a little bit about his relationships. So he has his girlfriend Tammy, he has his girlfriend Rachel in the later seasons, but I wanted to talk about Betty. So Betty was the escort that he called, so he was feeling really lonely in the beginning of the show, and he decided to call an escort service because no one was having sex with him and he was really lonely. So he called her and she showed up, and they actually spent the whole night talking. They never actually had sex, and she actually was like, "You're so pure, like I have to do this for a living." And she basically talked him off of how he really, all he wanted to do was have sex with his girlfriend Tammy, like was willing to propose to her just to have it and marry her. And I don't know, it just kind of like begs the question, like, how do you think the show did with doing away with stereotypes and biases that people might have against people with disabilities? Like, for example, someone with a disability must not have sex, like, but then they show in the show that they're just as interested. So what do you guys think about that?
So I think like people thinking that someone with a disability doesn't have sex is just you being like uneducated and ignorant, because you need food, water, and sex. That's literally what you need in life, and everyone needs it, whether you have a disability or not. So
that's true. Yeah, and like, I mean, he ends up getting it, but like, but like, I just think the show did a really good job with the stereotypes of like taking it and being like, look, here's someone with a disability, and like parallel to the storyline of like, for example, his sister who does not have a disability, but she's trying to like through all her relationships, she's having boyfriends, she has sex, and like how she goes through, they have him doing the exact same things, the exact same processes. So I feel like they're just breaking that stereotype completely in regards to that.
definitely.
Yeah, and also like breaking the stereotype of like, you know, I believe we've mentioned this in class as well, like, would you date someone with a disability, or, you know, have sex with someone with a disability? And like, at first, when I first was in the class, you know, it's something you need to think about, because, well, I needed to think about because I didn't really know much about it. But the more you learn, and the more you learn about these stereotypes and what disability actually is, and how it's really nothing that big of a deal, it really does change like your views and perspective on it. And I think the show was trying to do that. Obviously, it is harder to portray that in a show, but like you mentioned, they did a very well job at, oh, his sister's doing this, he's doing this as well. It's not just, oh, because he has a disability, he can't do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they also didn't like throw him into his character into things like, oh, and look, but he's a ladies' man, like,
Right,
look, despite
right.
the disability, like I think they accurately portrayed just a regular teenage boy.
And they didn't also add like a girlfriend that also had Down syndrome, if that makes sense. Like, because that they could have easily just been like, oh, look, he's interacting with someone who has Down syndrome. But no, I think that Tammy does have a disability?
Tammy has a developmental disability,
she
but
has-
Rachel does not. Rachel does not have any disability.
So, when he did it, well, both of them, they both didn't have Down syndrome, and they were pretty much just people, you know? And it's just, I really did like how the show, were just like, he's dating who he's dating, and he's having sex with who he's having sex. It doesn't have to be someone with the same disability or someone with another disability. It's just who you want and who you like from love.
I like the one part in the show. So Tom's mother, Kathleen, confronts Rachel because Rachel does not have a disability and she's 2 children that Tom kind of helps her take care of. So Kathleen kind of confronts her and is like, "What are you doing with my son? Like, you are aware that he's a little different." And she's like, "Of course I am, but I don't care. I only care about how he treats my children, and they love him." Like, she wants him to bring him into the home, to be around her children. Like, how we spoke about earlier, how some people are like, "Oh my gosh, no, that's contagious. Like, don't go near me, don't touch me." Like, obviously, like, those biases were broken in the show.
Right. Because, you know, because someone with Down syndrome could have a cognitive disability, or like, it could, you know, someone's initial reaction might be, "Oh my God, like, what are you doing? What are you," especially, you know, it's the mom. She should know better, but obviously the show wanted to portray that. So I think the show did a well job at just being like, it doesn't matter, like, what disability you do or don't have. Like, he's capable of doing things, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of times in the media, especially, people with disabilities are portrayed as like, "Oh, they can't do this, they can't do that." But I think the show did a great job of like being like, he's just normal. He's just a normal person that has Down syndrome, you know?
They showed him as like a boy, like, you know,
Right.
boys,
Like a teenage
people,
boy.
You got your needs, and that's one of those big needs. And you know, everyone looks for like an emotional connection, or like, you know, and then they want that physical connection too. But like, everyone wants. I mean, half the show is about that. So like, it wouldn't make sense if he didn't like have those desires. Honestly.
Yeah, his character also just like is really into gossip. He's funny. He always wants to be involved in what's going on. He likes to be in the loop. He loves to help people. Like, just a regular guy, just living his life. Like,
That was like all my high school year.
Yeah.
It's like, it's normal, like you said, and it kind of does like suck, I guess, that some people might think that they might not have normal lives because they have a disability, but they do, you know. And if any, like you said, he was funny. I'm sure I've seen an interview with him too. He's a funny guy in person too. How he interacts with people and stuff too in the show. Obviously, part of it is acting, but part of it is just him being himself.
Yeah. And that's why the show is like such a good show also, because it just opens doors to like, because I'm sure there are a bunch of viewers who watch the show and like they're just being educated on like everyone is normal, everyone's the same.
And breaking down these stereotypes that, oh, people with Down syndrome can't do this, people with Down syndrome can't, you know. And then you see an actor who's acting and doing all these things, and you know, it's kind of like, oh, they can do it, you know? So it is like breaking down a lot of stereotypes and, you know, maybe changing people's perspectives.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, they're also not doing it in like a, what did the woman in the TED Talk call it? Like the disability born? Or what did she call it in class that we were talking about? Like, they're not making him out to be this amazing character
like
that's a
an
huge role
inspiration.
model. He's so inspirational.
Like a hero,
Like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
look at this guy who has Down syndrome acting. That's so amazing. Like, no, he's just a regular person. Like, it's not any of that inspiration porn that we were watching in class that they were discussing. Like, it's just a TV show with an actor.
Right, and the actors within the show also don't, like, you know, look up to him, if that makes sense. Like, wow, you have Down syndrome and this is what you're doing. He's just treated like everybody else.
No one
and that's
congratulates him. Oh my gosh, you got a girlfriend. Congratulations.
Right. And they could easily portray that in the show, but they don't, because it kind of they just kind of want to show that he's a normal person as well. You know?
It would almost create more stereotypes and biases if they did do all of that.
Right,
so.
correct. And I like how they don't, you know, treat him like he's a kid or a baby. You know, they're not. He does have a very good support system, which also does play a big role on like how he's able to, you know, express himself and develop socially, but it's not like that helicopter parent where, you know, they're overprotective, like, my child has Down syndrome, let's protect him from the world. He's just kind of like let free, you know?
Yeah, like he moved into the guest house at one point with Jack, his best friend, and he lives by himself. I mean, granted, it's the guest house of his home, but the parents have no problem. They're like, yeah, go live on your own. Like, you're grown up. You deserve to have your own life. Like, they're not like sheltering him. They're not like, no, stay at home. Like,
Right.
do you feel like a lot of people do that nowadays with people with disabilities? Like a parent who has a child with a disability?
I think it's getting a little better because like I have like one of my best friends has a sister with Down syndrome, and she's a little younger than he is. So I don't know whenever she gets to that age how his parents will treat it, but I think that they'll be a lot more lenient, like kind of like his parents are with Tom.
And I think it's important to kind of be, like you said, lenient and kind of just be like relaxed and because they might also, because someone with a disability, like we talk about in class, doesn't think like, oh, I'm different. Like they want to be just like, they are just like us, if that makes sense. So if you are like if you like shelter them and are like a helicopter parent, you know, you might change their perspective of themselves, you know, if that makes sense. Like they might be like, oh, well, like why can't I do that, you know, like everybody else is doing it, why can't I, like,
Yeah.
am I so different because I have a disability? Like, you know, why are you treating me like this? So it could, you know, especially if it starts in a young, obviously you take care of the kids when they're younger, but when they grow up and like, you know, it's time to date and time to go out with your friends and time to do, you know, regular teenage stuff, like I think we should be allowed to do
I
so.
think their parents could only like hope all that for their kids though. Like I feel like they don't want them to be looked at differently. So like they, like obviously like everyone wants their kid to find somebody, to like have relationships, to like go out and do things, like to go on their own, to like as much as they fully can. And like I feel like that's like exciting for the parents almost. I feel like parents that are helicopter parents are parents that don't have children with disabilities. I feel like those are just like most like parents that have kids with like that have disabilities are very like supportive, but they like push them upwards and they don't like keep them stagnant and like hover over them. Like they give them all the opportunity they can give them and then hope that they can like flourish on their own.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Do you believe that like this opened up like new doors for the world to see that like Tom had relationships with other people? Like how do you think viewers like thought and responded to that?
I think it did. I think that we like to think, or people like to think of like disabilities, and you know, you kind of like, oh, you need 24-hour intensive care, or you know, especially someone with Down syndrome where they have like a cognitive disability as well. I think viewers at first might have been a little surprised because he actually does have Down syndrome, and you know, your first instinct is, oh, he's probably just acting. But because like it's a visible disability, something that you can see, I think it kind of just, like I said earlier, kind of broke down these like barriers and these stereotypes. They were kind of just like, oh, like this is what it really is, you know? This is like having a child with a disability or having a friend, anybody in like your inner circle with a disability doesn't mean that you have to treat them differently, or doesn't mean that you have to hover over them or like be overprotective of them.
The first time I watched the show, it definitely changed my perspective because I had previously to watching the show actually never met someone with Down syndrome. My best friend's brothers have autism, so I've dealt with that for my entire life, but I've never actually met someone who has Down syndrome. So like the show honestly taught me a lot and it showed me a lot, and then when I actually looked it up and realized that Luke Zimmerman actually does have Down syndrome, like it was really eye-opening. I was like, wow, like he's no different than me. Like almost like even in the dating perspective, talking about invisible versus visible, like previously, like maybe I wouldn't have dated someone with a disability that was visible, but like he's just like me, so like why wouldn't I? Like you'll date someone with an invisible one, like a mental disability, but why not visible one?
it just kind of made me think about it for a
When
minute.
that question was like brought up in class, like I thought about it and then I realized like how did I even think about that? Because like my ex-boyfriend like broke both his ankles and he had a physical disability for a while, and we would go out and take his wheelchair out and we go, and I was never embarrassed at all. Like it was just like I didn't think twice about it, and like I don't think I would ever think twice about it, because I think part of relationship is making a connection with somebody, and like those little barriers, like they're all irrelevant at the end of the day. Like it's all about like the way you like feel towards them, not like looking at them and being like, oh wow, like you don't see it when you feel a certain way and you're blind to it, and people like stare and like look at us, and I didn't care. Like he had 2 boots on his legs and I was like, I don't, and I'd wheel him around and like I didn't care. Like we like, you know, and like we were young and like, but like I don't think it's like anything that people should really consider as a barrier or boundary.
I think that
Go.
I think I was just gonna say, in like today's generation, especially like social media, you know, we have this like perfect outlook of like someone, or and because like physical disabilities, you know, some people are like gonna look and stare, and then you're gonna feel embarrassed or ashamed. But you, like you said, when you love someone, it doesn't really matter. And like you said, you didn't know that was gonna happen. You know, you didn't know someone would break his ankles. But it just I know she talks a lot about this. You know, a disability can happen to anyone at any time. And me and my boyfriend have been dating for 6 years, and we actually kind of touched up on this. And I said, like, I kind of brought it up, and at first he was kind of like, ooh, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, let's say, like, you know, I lose a leg, like, would you break up with me? And he was like, no. And I was like, so why does it make a difference, you know? Like, it shouldn't make a difference. Coming into a relationship, already being in a relationship, it shouldn't make a difference of how you feel about them because of the way they look, or, you know, of their disability, because it's all about that connection. And if you love them more, you are attracted to them, because you don't find out until you really get to know them. If that makes sense.
And I feel like you never truly know a person until they go through something so adverse or as challenging as getting a disability or something like that. Like, I don't know, what do you guys think? I feel like it's just all of a sudden someone has a challenge and you find the real true person. Like, my best friend actually got in a car accident now 4 years ago, where she broke her neck in a few places and broke her ribs. So she was in a wheelchair and was told she was going to be paralyzed. And her parents weren't like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with a daughter who can't walk? She's going to be in a wheelchair. They were like, all right, let's take this one day at a time. Let's do this. Her mother helped her with bathing herself and everything. Like, everyone in her family was so supportive. All of us were so supportive. I could care less if I'm walking around with my best friend in a wheelchair. Like, so why would I care if I was dating someone in one? But like, my friend she used a wheelchair for about 4 or 5 months before she was actually able to walk again. And then she was still kind of using the wheelchair and using a walker, and she actually went to concerts and a rave with her wheelchair. So like that video we watched, the guy in class who was crowd surfing, like, my best friend did that with her wheelchair.
That's awesome.
No, people were probably videotaping her, like, wow, look at this person. Like, she didn't care. She actually went on to like go to churches and talk, but nothing about the disability that she had. Like, that wasn't even part of her talks. Her talks were basically just about having a positive outlook on life, and I feel like that's a really, really big part on someone with a disability. Like, you have to be optimistic. You can't, and that's like part of society. Like, we can't hinder those people and be so like judgmental towards them.
Yeah. And I think part of it is like, we love convenience. Like, if you think about it, everything is about convenience, you know? And so even like when I know we watched that movie where they didn't have like a rail or anything like that for people with disabilities or people who were wheelchair users, and it was just because it was an inconvenience to build it, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of it too is when you think about, you know, when you first think about a disability, also I feel like a lot of people think about physical disabilities immediately. You know, they don't think about those mental disabilities, like someone with anxiety or someone with depression or schizophrenia. They automatically go with, oh, the person who uses a wheelchair or the person, you know. So when we think about that, and then we when she first asked that question in class, like, would you date someone with physical disability, with a disability? I personally thought about a physical disability, and I said, well, would I? And then I thought to myself, oh, would it be harder? And I hate that I thought that because it was just inconvenient, if that makes sense. Like, why does it matter? Like you said, when you went out with your boyfriend and you would like put help him out in the wheelchair, like, it's not that big of a deal if you think about it, but it's just people think, oh, because you know we're used to walking, it's more convenient. So it's I think also in this like generation, and the media does this a lot too. It's a lot about being convenient, and like we just like the easy way out, and that's why we think of people who have disabilities or physical disabilities as, wow, like I can't believe you're doing that, because we think it's so much harder, but it's not harder. They're just doing it in a different way. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I remember like we were going out to dinner once, and like he made all these plans, and he was so upset that like our friend was coming with, and like I was like I didn't want to tell him that like I physically cannot pick you up and get you in and out of my car. Like I can't do that, and I didn't know how to tell it to him, so I didn't tell it to him. So our friend like came and he was like kind of like bothered, and I was like, well, how else do you think like I can carry you and like help you? And like to him, he didn't even like remember that he was like hurt or anything. Like he was just so upset that like our like really good friend was coming with, and I was just like, I'm sorry, like I didn't invite him, like he invited himself anyways. Like you can't even be mad at me.
Can't be mad at me. Don't be mad at him.
Yeah, and you should be happy he's coming, because otherwise you couldn't even be going out. Like you know, and like I didn't care. Like we were having so much fun. Like we would have more fun with him, wheeling him around. Like we would like make a scene because we were having fun. Like it wasn't like we were just making a scene to make a scene. Like you know, like.
And also kind of touching on that, I tore my ACL my junior senior year in high school, and so obviously surgery, and then I was on crutches for a while, and at first I was like so upset. I was like, I can't believe like I am going to be on crutches for like a month. Like I was really upset, and then I was just like thinking back at it, like if I could go back, it really wasn't. It really was not that big of a deal, guys. Like, okay, yeah, I had to use crutches, but it wasn't like, you know, we talk about like making Penn State more accessible and stuff like that. My school was very accessible. Like the front entrance, you know, there was people, they can use like the railway. There were the elevators and stuff like that. And I don't know, kind of going back to the whole thing of inconvenience. I guess I was just mad because I felt like it was harder for me. You know, and it was kind of selfish, you know, me looking out, and I was like, oh, well, everybody is gonna get to class faster, you know, it's gonna take me a longer time, but in reality, it didn't. I would get there and I'd be like, oh, well, because I'm not late, I would try to be late and like try to blame it on my crutches, but it's just one of those things that you don't think about till it happens to you, you know, and not that like I had like a disability, but you know, for a short period of time, I did, you know, I feel like I could kind of like relate to like what it is like using crutches, and what it is like, you know, I did have like people, I know she kind of mentioned this in class, asked before like, you want to help somebody because you think you're helping them, but you're really not. And people would try to open the door, people would try to open the door, and then they would just kind of let it fall. I'm like, wait, it's coming, like the door is falling on me, like what are you doing? And so it was one of those things that it's really hard to understand unless you're in it, or you're educated on it, or you know, you've kind of seen it firsthand, like you know, with friends or people like that. But I do like how the show they didn't even focus on that, and it was just kind of portrayed him as a regular person. He just had Down syndrome.
Okay, so I think we've all kind of agreed that the show portrays disability and Down syndrome in particular in a very positive and normal light. How have you guys seen that differently in other films? Maybe like how it's changed through time?
I think not only just in films, but in media and even culture, like 50 years ago, people specifically with Down syndrome definitely were seen as like kids. Like they were just seen like, oh, you can't handle the responsibility, like I'm not going to give it to you. Like they were seen as not an adult, if you know what I mean. Like just because they have a disability doesn't mean they can't do the same things we do. And I feel like media back then in older movies and stuff, if there was someone in there who was acting that part, they were just like a castaway, if you know what I mean. They were someone just to throw off to the side. But I feel like now media has changed, and it is a positive thing, where people with Down syndrome they are an individual, they are a human. They have a brain, and like they're just like us. They're living with this condition. So I definitely feel like it has shifted from the last couple, or not a couple years, but 50 years ago, or however long you want to go back, negative to positive.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Shameless, and on the show, though, one of the characters, I forget her name, she had a baby, and it came out, she gave birth to this, I think it was a boy, and he had Down syndrome, and she immediately was like, I don't want him anymore, because he wasn't normal, but then I'm pretty sure her mom, took her in, or took the baby in, so, the girl wasn't obviously aware of, the normal life that, the life that she could give her child, and how it really didn't matter that he had Down syndrome, but her mom took her in anyway, took in the baby, so I do think it's changed. It's bad, that show showed it in a good way and a bad way, I guess.
You can even look back as far as when Forrest Gump came out. I don't really know when exactly that was, but that was also more of a time period, and he went through his whole life and how different people treated him. And even one of the quotes is his mom called him stupid or something like that, and that's just another way that the language has changed since then.
This is a question I have for you guys. I haven't brought this up yet, but I've been thinking about this pretty frequently today and past week. Do you guys think it is important? We talk about every time we say normal in class or discussions, we use the air quotes or whatever. Because we don't want to be rude, but do you guys think it's important to have some sense of normality in our world? We always base someone with a disability off, are they normal? Is it a good thing to have normality in our culture, or do you think there should be no normal? It's you can be whoever the heck you want to be, you can do whatever you want. Do you think it is important as a culture to have these normal values, or do you think normalness should just not even exist? I don't know what you guys think.
I think normal is boring.
It was boring, yeah.
I just think everyone's so different that how can you even categorize normal? Everyone, I feel like everyone here either has been affected by something that's not normal, or knows someone personally that has a disability, or maybe they themselves have a disability, but I feel like it's so common that nobody really leads a normal life, whatever, so.
Yeah, I think ideally there would be no such thing as normal, and I guess everything would become normal. But yeah, I think I agree. I feel there's so much that we base off of what we view as the normal experience, when in reality every single person's experience is so different, whether or not they have a disability, no matter what background they come from or anything like that.
Yeah, I actually just saw the Mr. Rogers documentary. And I used to watch that as a kid, and he would always it was just such a unique show for kids, and he always, his main point was getting across to kids that were watching that they were all unique and normal, or not normal, they're all unique in their own way, and they're special, but they could all be loved equally, and that even then, he'd have kids with disabilities come on the show, and I think that probably educated other kids watching as well.
Definitely. I remember seeing it on Sesame Street too.
Yeah.
They would just have kids come on the show that used wheelchairs, that had Down syndrome, that had all sorts of disabilities, and it just they all would interact together, so it would kind of show other kids at a young age that there's not really yeah, you might be normal, but he's also normal in his way. Everyone's normal in their own way. Your normal is not the same as his normal, and whatever.
So even though I know that we definitely have had more recently, with the introduction of the character in Sesame Street who has an autism spectrum disorder and all those things you guys just talked about, why do you think there aren't so many actors, movies and for older audiences, I guess, that have actors with disabilities? Because I know that we talked about Tom Zimmerman does have Down syndrome, but that's not necessarily the norm in Hollywood, in media, to have an actor that does suffer from or does have that disability. So why do you think that is?
I just recently saw a clip. I forget where it's from, if it was in class or not, but the reason, even outside of acting, if an employer, they're fearful of hiring someone. Oh, it was in that movie we watched in class, the guy who lost his hearing. They said that like they're fearful of hiring someone with this disability because they're afraid they're a liability. Can they get the job done? Like, I'm all about productivity here. Like, I want you to do your job. Can you do your job? And they're fearful that just because they have this disability that they can't do their job. And I feel like acting, I think there's more room to work with in acting because like as we've done right here, there's multiple takes. There's room for error in acting, and they can be taught different things. So I feel like acting, they can definitely use more of those people with disabilities.
And everyone like brings their own personality to acting. Like everyone like in Hollywood, you know, they choose certain people for certain roles because they have like a certain flair to them. And I think someone with disability, they would have the same thing. Like if, you know, like Tom, like he had, like obviously there was something about him besides his disability that they were like, we like you because of your humor or whatever. Like, so I think, you know, there's like room in acting to play with kind of with like your personality.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting to think about, like, I think we touched on it earlier, but like, was their sole purpose for hiring him was because he had this disability? Or do you think like we said earlier in the interviews, was there more things about his personality, his real life personality that made him hireable and desirable for the job? Like, it's something that you could debate on both sides. Like, you could say, oh, I'm sure the actors or the producers and directors like this guy, or they could say, oh, it's just a publicity stunt and they want to say, oh, hey, look what we did, we hired this guy who actually has Down syndrome to play this Down syndrome role. Like, I think you could go either way, but you don't know what the directors are thinking at the time. So
I mean, at the end of the day, like, who better to play a character with Down syndrome than a person with Down syndrome? Because obviously, just like anybody else, like every single person with Down syndrome has a different experience through their life, but they have that unique perspective that not everyone has. So I just think like whether they hired him for the right reasons, for the wrong reasons, at the end of the day, it's his perspective and it's a real perspective. It's genuine. So I think that it brings that extra thing to the table.
he doesn't even really have to act, he just has to be himself in that situation. Obviously, like, he has to follow the script as far as what to say, maybe some expressional things, but all the rest of the stuff is all his genuine reaction to whatever he wants to say.
But like historically in like Hollywood, they've always like used actors that don't have disabilities to portray people with disabilities, which is like kind of, it's like a weird thing to do because how do you portray someone that like you've never, like you don't know what they've gone through kind of thing, you've never experienced it. So I just, like in the movie like Rain Man, for example, he doesn't have autism spectrum disorder, but he's playing someone who does. So how do you like act like someone when you're not that person, you know?
I mean, I think in certain instances, like, there are certain times where, like, just an actor is playing somebody where they've never had that experience, but if you have that person who does have the experience available, why wouldn't you use the genuine?
Yeah, and it could also cause problems, like, if he's portraying, like, autism spectrum disorder in, like, the wrong way, or, like, making it seem, I don't know, someone who watches it, who has it, might be like, that's not what, I don't know, I mean, I know it is a spectrum, but it's not a spectrum that he doesn't know what he doesn't have that, so it's not, he's kind of, they, I guess, kind of made it up as they went, in a way, I feel like, you know, like, there's no one, they could have chosen someone who, I guess, had that, you know.
Is it the film Music Within? Is that what we watched?
Yeah.
So the guy in the wheelchair, what does he have? Cerebral palsy. In that situation, what if someone who really does have cerebral palsy, like, I'm not like that, like, I don't act like that, I don't, like, some people would, obviously, like, I don't drool, I just have slight qualities here and there, but I don't act like that, like, would they be offended of that?
Exactly.
Like, I think there's a balance.
Yeah,
to
there's
that.
like a fine line that, like, where you make a movie that brings awareness, kind of, and, like, make a movie that shows it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
So do you think the lack of actors with the actual disability is due to just not having people applying who have those disabilities, not having actors who have those disabilities, or do you think there's some level of discrimination still there?
I would definitely say discrimination because, you know, someone with who has these disabilities going through school, if they tell their teachers, I want to be an actor, there's no way their teacher's going to be like, oh, definitely, like, I'll help you find your job. They're like, why don't you start here working for like the grocery store first? Like, that's the sort of thing that they do. I worked at a school over the summer in a special ed room, and you know, they had internships during the week and they would go out and do their jobs, but it was very, you know, minimal task work, and many of them could have done, you know, they're capable of doing more than that, but they're not given the opportunity. And so I feel like if someone's passion, they know they want to act, or they know they want to play music, or they know they want to do this, I just think sometimes in the schools they're not given the chance to pursue that because the stigma is like, this is your disability, this is what you can do, kind of thing, because employers aren't going to look at you.
I feel like it could be argued the other way too, because since they are told you're only going to work at Walmart and check things out, they're not going to want to try to be an actor. They're not going to want to try to direct a movie. Like,
They're going to doubt themselves.
exactly, they're not going to think they're capable, so they're not going to apply, and they're not going to want to do it. I don't want to embarrass myself. Like, I'm just a burden on everyone. I'm not going to try. Like, I think they have that attitude. Some of them do. But if we teach them at a young age, like, no, like, just because you have this disability doesn't mean that you can't go and star in this movie. Like, you can do whatever you want. You can try to do whatever you want.
Yeah, I actually I found an article that Luke Zimmerman, the actor for Tom Bowman, he won an award in 2012, like an advocacy award. And the article even explained that he was on this high school football team. And at first he was just a manager, but eventually he was suiting up and he got to play a couple games. And he also placed on the swim team for the butterfly stroke. And then he listed that he was in the orchestra and the band and the chorus. Like, he must have had a great support system and really helped him get to where he was too.
I think it goes back to the whole like internalized ableism thing that we talked about in class, like both of you were talking about, like if they're told like, you know, like you can work in a grocery store, like this is what you can do, then they grow up believing that, some people, and it just kind of determines your whole future. But like you said, he was like involved in all these things and he was successful in all these things because he tried it, because he had the support system to kind of not be afraid to go out there, and like you said, like they feel like they'll embarrass themselves or something like that. But if they don't grow up hearing all of those things and it's just kind of an opportunity kind of thing, then I think that it opens a lot more doors.
So basically it all comes back to
Opportunity! In conclusion, we think that The Secret Life of the American Teenager did a great job positively portraying disability.
They also did a great job at breaking down stereotypes and stigmas.
The show was really authentic because the actor actually had Down syndrome.
remember to always use person first language or Coach Franklin will make you do burpees.
Hey, we're group 6 and I'm Ben.
Emma.
Melissa,
Maddie.
Kathy.
Sheila.
Sabrina.
Alex.
Jackie.